It was rather scary that it all might work on time. It was rather scary that it all might work on time.
Awesome. I see you doing your dance, so it must be working. Awesome. I see you doing your dance, so it must be working.
Oh, baby. Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. Okay. But we are now live on YouTube. They saw all that, so that was good. Rick is here. The only man, he's the only man that can handle this many women. I'll say that again when he gets live. Rick is here. He's the only man that can handle this many women.
My reputation precedes me.
I think
I didn't notice. Was it all women except me?
It is all women except you. I tried to get another man to be on here, and every man I asked was too busy. And I was like, that's fine. So Sheila gets to do her thing.
Okay, they're chicken.
All right. Rick, I'm going to make you a co-host as well. Everyone is a co-host. What that means is a co-host, every one of you, everybody's here now. Since every one of you is a co-host, what it means is that you will be able to make sure everything is off. Very good. That you will be able to unmute yourself whenever you need to. So our audience, when they first get in, they can talk and they can chat a little bit. I'm going to bring them in just a second or so. And they can talk and they can chat with you all for a little bit as long as they're not inappropriate. And then I'm going to mute them all. And you are the only ones that can unmute yourself because I'm going to remove the permissions for them to unmute themselves. And the only reason you can unmute yourself is because you are actually the person's performing. Also, you can keep your line open as long as there's no loud sound behind you or you feel like there's not going to be a loud sound behind you so that you can laugh and we can hear each other and things like that. But if there's something behind you, if you're gonna, if the dog starts barking, just remember that you're gonna be live. So just watch your sound. I will quickly go through and click you out because I'll mute you in a heartbeat. All right, we're already live on Facebook. And we want to thank, on YouTube and the 4 people on YouTube that are watching us. Thank you for being here. We are admitting all. Break a lens, everybody. I have been so excited about this night. Be careful with Jessica. She's first, but she's had an exhausting, wonderful night. If you experienced anything last night, it was extraordinary, but she's exhausted. So thank y'all. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're expecting a lot more to come on in the door. So say hi, greet each other.
Turn on some light.
Mm-hmm. We are so glad so many people are here. We're going to wait for a few more people are coming. We're excited. We had about 100 people register for tonight, and we have people on the YouTube page as well. Y'all are quiet bunch this night. I'm a little worried about you. We're going to have to rev you up a little bit. Just to remind you, you're adults only. So it can go all kinds of places tonight. And if you have and I don't know what that's going to mean. So, you know.
I'm getting scared.
Oh, it'll be
All
fun.
right, Sheila.
They're all muted. It's why they're not speaking.
I know, that's all. And I haven't muted them, so it's not on me. They're not muted because of me this time yet. Not
That's
yet.
why I unmuted. Hello, Laura.
I haven't muted them yet.
Let's see who else are. There's how nice.
I was up late last night listening to stories.
Ah, were you with us or were you at something else?
With you.
Okay,
and
that's what I
Donna
thought.
Washington
this was an amazing night.
and then the
Amazing,
others.
amazing night. Loved every moment of it. David, thank you for being our long-term waiter. You were here at 9:30, waiting to get in the door. And everybody said he wanted a front row place, and I'm like, I'm not certain what front row looks like on the Zoom, but he got it. Whatever that is, he got it. Hey, Jerry. I'm glad you came today. I'm looking at some of these names. My goodness. Friends that, Joanne, who follows us all the time. Alan's here, Janet, Kathy. A good group of people already.
Sarah, Burnett, you're here, and Parlin McGaw.
Right.
Hey.
It's a good group of people already.
Caymans.
And then we already have 9 people already here from YouTube. Excited to see the YouTube folks around. This is good. Good night of stories already. All righty. Hello from Tucson. Low tonight is 90. Yep, that we just finished. We're still at 89 down here. So I understand, Mary Jo. I understand. I'm having to be old school now. Take out my little, it's that time of life for a woman in my position. It is good. Ooh, look at here. More coming in the door.
Hey, Robin Beatty and Len Cabral.
Yeah.
And buddy people.
There's Len. Where's Rob?
Ladies and gentlemen, it is 10 o'clock. It is the adults only hour time. The children have been put to bed. Your favorite drink is in your hand, whether it's lemonade or spiked lemonade. And we are going to get ready. This is on YouTube as well, on my channel on YouTube, Sheila Arnold. You can just type in Sheila Arnold Storyteller, and we already have folks there. Welcome as well. I am going to be recording this. We have a couple of the folks that need this recorded, so I will be recording as well. Just a reminder, you can use the chat to say all the clap, clap, claps, applause, and all that good stuff. I am going to be muting everyone. However, our storytellers are going to be unmuted, and they'll be able to respond sort of like our live audience is what they'll be like. When I mute you, I'm not going to give you the permission to unmute yourself. I love you. I just don't trust you. Okay. That's, and it's just being honest. Glad you came. And if you take offense to that, oh, I'm so sorry. Welcome to the world of Zoom.
No, you're not.
Where we all learn. So I'm super excited that everybody is here, and we're about to get started. I'm going to mute everybody. Here we go. Mute and this. Now, if people knew me well enough, you know that reality is I just like being able to be in charge of something. So, so this is really about the fact that I get some control. It's why Jessica and I and some others, Rick as well, do this, is so we have some kind of control over something in our lives, very little as well. I'm going to let my storytellers unmute themselves, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very first storyteller. It is with great joy that I bring up Miss Jessica Piscatelli Robinson. And if you don't know Jessica, then you have been missing the boat. Jessica is the director and founder and producer of Better Said Than Done Productions and all the work she does there. She's an amazing videographer. She has helped us in this new world by helping us know what to look like on camera. And all that time, she's still been telling stories. And Jessica, we're going to have a collective tip jar today. You're going to see that on everybody's thing, PayPal or Venmo. Someone wanted me to mention that. SheilaArnold39@AOL.com. Go visit Jessica and see what programs are happening at bettersaidthandone.com. You can also check out her book, Roar, True Tales of Women Warriors. You can buy it at lots of places, but I'm going to encourage you to go online and find the Curious Iguana bookstore in Frederick and buy it from them. Keep our bookstores alive. I'm going to shut up because we need Jessica to speak to us. And here we go.
Believe it or not, I have always loved a good story, sometimes to my own detriment. For example, I have frequently, occasionally, tried to sort of force my life to fit into a certain plot because I thought it would make a more perfect story. For example, I went to film school in New York, and this one time we had a night shoot in New York City in the winter outside. So it was cold. And this one guy, Simon, who I'd never met before, shows up to the night shoot without gloves. Now, Simon was kind of hot and he smelled really good, so I lent him the spare pair of gloves that I had with me. And of course, in the morning when we wrapped, Simon forgot to return the gloves to me. But a few days later, he called the director and he got my number, and he called me up and he asked me if he could take me out to dinner to return my gloves. Well, of course I said yes, because he was hot and he smelled nice. And at dinner, well, it turns out Simon was an idiot. I mean, straight up dumb. But I kept dating him for far too long because I just thought it was so cute the way we met, you know? And I thought it would make a great story to share with our grandkids. Now, I did eventually move on from Simon, and a few years later, I started dating this guy, Jason, and things got kind of serious, and we decided to move in together. And he was from Virginia, and he was a good Southern gentleman, you know, from the deep South of Virginia. So I decided I would move with him to Virginia, and we bought a house together in Reston, and we started a new story together of this young couple in love, starting our life journey together. But after about a year of living with Jason, I started to realize that he and I were maybe not living the same story. Like, I was in a romance movie, you know, with a happy couple that was going to be together forever. And he seemed to be in like an annoying male-centric sitcom where the nerdy, cute guy just wants to be left alone, but his annoying girlfriend always expects him to like stop painting his Warhammer models to hang out with her. So when I started to realize that we were in these two different storylines, I started to think about maybe breaking up with him. But it was complicated because we owned a house together. And as I was trying to figure out what I should do, well, he changed the story. He kidnapped me. Not in like a weird, scary kind of way. We were supposed to go to a friend's house for dinner, except as we were driving west, he passed the exit to her house and just kept going. And I said, where are we going? And he said, oh, you know, I got this gift certificate to this fancy restaurant in Middleburg, so I figured I'd take us there. And since I figured I was going to take us there, I got us a room at an inn in Middleburg. And he took care of getting a dog sitter, and he packed clothes for me for the weekend. And over dinner, the very expensive, fancy dinner, his voice shook. And I got butterflies in my belly because I knew what was happening. And it was such a great story that when he proposed, I mean, what else could I do? I said yes. And that story carried me through the next several months as I planned the wedding all by myself, because he he gave me a ring. I mean, he swept me off my feet that one time, right? He put us back in romance mode, but then that was it. So I planned the wedding. And then Jason decided he liked to do that a lot. He decided what we were going to do for our honeymoon, and I agreed. When he said, let's hike the Grand Canyon for our honeymoon. I mean, I love the Grand Canyon and I love hiking. So I said, fine, yeah, let's do it. And then I set about planning that too. Now, to sleep in the Grand Canyon, to camp there, you have to get permits. And I got us permits for 6 nights. And this is partly so, you can pay the fee to the national park, but also so that the rangers will know where you're supposed to be every single night. Because a lot of people die in the canyon every year, and the rangers need to know where to go looking for your body when you go missing. So I made the arrangements. We got married. We flew to Phoenix, and then we started heading up to the Grand Canyon. But here's the thing. I got us permits for 6 nights in the canyon because I was kind of thinking that I was thinking we might be tired after our wedding, so that we would maybe want to spend the night in Flagstaff or Sedona and just kind of chill for the first night of our honeymoon. So I didn't get us a permit for that night. But Jason, he didn't want to waste the time or the money stopping along the way. And he said, let's just go straight to the canyon. But I was worried that we might get kicked out, if they caught us without a permit for that night or fined at the very least. And since, Jason had decided that we were going to sleep there, well, then we decided that what we would do is hide from the rangers. Now, most people, when they go to the canyon, they go to the Bright Angel Trail. That's where the millions of tourists go every year. It's a really very cushy trail. It's like 4 feet wide enough to fit a donkey and a human at the same time, which happens a lot on the Bright Angel Trail. There's a water pipe that runs along it, so you can get water and fill your canteen several times along the way. There is a bathroom along this is how cushy the Bright Angel Trail is. It astounds me that so many people die in the canyon every year. I don't know what they're doing. So we decided that since that's where all the people were, that's where all the rangers would be. So when we got to the canyon, instead of turning left and heading towards the Bright Angel Trail, we turned right and headed towards an old mining trail. We had a trail map and it indicated there was a mining trail several miles in that direction. And sure enough, when we got to the parking lot, there was only space for like 5 cars, but ours was the only car there. That's how remote this place was. We got out and
Did she just freeze? I think she just froze on us.
Just froze, yeah.
She did.
I think
Let's
she
talk.
froze.
She did. But it was a delightful freeze. Look at that position that she's holding so well.
Right there in that ominous parking lot.
It is. And now she's back.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful pose. You should have seen yourself. She doesn't hear us. Can you hear us? We see you. She can't see us.
She's muted.
Well, no, she's not muted. She's very much unmuted. She just can't hear or see us. Can you hear us? Well, we can't hear you.
Honeymoon.
I will start to sing elevator music. My name is Mike.
We can finish Jessica's story for her now. Get her into a whole lot of trouble.
There was a whole lot of trouble. And so she's working on that. Nope, can't hear you now. We love you though.
Aww.
We might have to come back to this one.
work now.
What? Did you say something?
Work.
Yes, we hear you.
We hear you.
My computer just went black.
Yes.
So I didn't know if you still saw me or not.
We did not. You were frozen in a beautiful position, darling. Beautiful position.
But
You
we
guys want to find out what happened next?
you.
Well, yes, all of us are waiting on bated breath, and someone mentioned that it was how a perfect story goes, just like this.
Cliffhanger.
All
Okay,
right,
so I'm going to try to get through it.
you turned.
Okay, so we started down on this old mining trail, and here's the thing: the miners who built the trail, they did not have tourism in mind. This was not cushy. There was no water pipe. There were no bathrooms, and the trail, was pretty narrow. It was efficient. There were several places along the trail where I literally had to like hold on to the face of the canyon and sort of boulder along to not fall to my death. But we made it out to the plateau that we were sleeping on. There was no campsites, of course, and thankfully we didn't see another soul, because I don't know, frankly, how we would have passed them on this trail. So on the first night of our honeymoon, we were utterly alone in the middle of the Grand Canyon with no one else around. It was really quite a romantic adventure. It was like romancing the stone without the bad guys. We boiled some water, we ate our food out of a bag, we went to sleep, and we woke up the next morning at about 4:30 a.m. because if you don't know, there is no shade in the middle of the Grand Canyon when you're on a plateau. So the sun comes up pretty early. Now, I didn't mention this, but it was in fact July. And as someone earlier mentioned, it's warm in July in Arizona. And this was no exception. At 4:30 in the morning, it was a balmy 90, 95 degrees. That was the first thing I noticed when I woke up. The next thing I noticed was, I don't know if it was because we had flown in the day before, or, because of the altitude, or just because it was hot and we weren't used to that. We had gone through an awful lot of water on our hike, and our water supply was dangerously low. So I thought, you know what, it's 4:30, maybe 5 a.m. by the time we're out of here. It took us 3 hours to hike in. We can be to the top by 10 a.m., 11 a.m. the latest. Yeah, we don't have a lot of water, but I think we can make it to the surface, and there's water there. Like, we're not going to die in 5 hours. Jason, as he sometimes frequently did, disagreed. And he thought that our plan should be to continue on down the trail to where on the trail map it indicated that there was water about a mile further along. Considering the state of the trail on the way in and the fact that I don't think anyone had used it in 100 years, I wasn't so sure that there would be water there. But as was often the case, Jason knew what to do. He had decided, and so I went along with it. Now, I wasn't going to go with him. The trail further down looked even scarier than the one we had come in on. So I let him go, and I packed up our camp, and that kept me busy for 5 or 10 minutes because we didn't have that much stuff with us. And then to distract myself, I sat down on a rock and I leaned my head against a rock, and I started to try to think happy thoughts about this exciting romantic adventure that we were on and this wonderful story of the beginning of the rest of our life, which kept me busy for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I started thinking about the circumstances that I found myself in, and I started thinking that maybe we weren't in a romance story. I mean, think about the elements here, right? We have 2 young people, and I might even say attractive young people, who are sexually active. I mean, it was our honeymoon, and we were doing something illicit. We were hiding from the rangers. Furthermore, absolutely nobody would ever know where to go looking for us to be able to find us. Maybe we were in a horror story. Maybe these hills had eyes. But I am a realist at heart, so I thought, you know what, there's not really enough people who come through here for there to be a whole gaggle of hill people waiting to kill them. So maybe it's not a horror story, okay? Maybe it's more like a perfect, tragic
love story, like that movie Love Story. Maybe one of us was gonna die. I mean, how perfect would that be? We were on the first day of our honeymoon, and obviously that person would be Jason because he's the one who went off and put himself in danger. Or maybe I was supposed to rescue him, or maybe if I went to go rescue him, then I would fall to my death, and then he'd come back and find me gone and dead, and then he'd kill himself like Romeo and Juliet. And it's just, once I went there, I couldn't come back, you know? I started convincing myself that he was dead already. And then I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should go look for him or if I should try to hike out and get help. So I just sat there on the rock, sweating and watching my sweat evaporate and turn to salt like instantly, and baking in the sun because there was no shade. And as I sat there drying out in the sun, thinking about how I might die if I went one way, or die if I went the other, or die of dehydration, I did the only thing I could think to do. I started sobbing, just wasting all that precious water and salt. And I don't know how long I sat there with just the tears streaming down my face, but at some point, Jason came back and he just kind of kicked my boot, and I looked up and I saw him, and I was so happy. I jumped up and I wrapped my arms around him and I said, "Oh, thank God, you're alive." And he just kind of peeled my arms off of him and said, "I just went to get water." I didn't love his tone, but it was the first day of our honeymoon, the first day of the rest of our lives together. And I wanted this to be a romance and not a horror movie. So I took the water from him and I put it in my backpack, and I hoisted my pack. He hoisted his, and we hiked out of there in silence. And we survived, obviously. We made it to the top of the canyon, and then we survived the next 7 days hiking the canyon rim to rim, and it was amazing. What can I say? And our marriage survived another year. I realized, yeah, these two stories did not go well together. And it turns out Jason didn't take well to me breaking his heart. He got kind of mean during the divorce, and it started a 2-year vicious, painful battle. Not really even a battle. I kind of just let him take everything, but it was horrible. It was so painful, in fact, that I found myself fantasizing that I was in one of those alternate reality stories, you know, where everything pivots on this one moment. If things went differently, then the girl gets to be happy and have just the perfect ending that she had wanted. And so I started fantasizing about this perfect story where two young people in love head off into the Grand Canyon together, but only one of them comes back alive.
Oh. Woo! Go ahead, girl. What a great story. My only concern was you were almost in a horror movie with a guy named Jason. That's all I gotta say. All I gotta say, you know. Thank you, Crystal, for the great work you do. That is so nice. It's just wonderful to see you, darling girl. I love you
Sheila.
so much. Well, now I get the joy to go to another country and to see our friend Valentina Ortiz. Man, we are so lucky to be able to see Valentina and to have her as one of our bridge builders and such. Now, Valentina just froze there for a quick second. I'm hoping that will not last long. There we go. And we just went into the red, Valentina, on your internet. Do you want me to show the video?
It's your call.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're at a point. She did a wonderful job and sent us her video, and I want you to see all of her video. And I also love for you to see Valentina live. So I don't want it to get stopped in the middle, because I know if it stops in the middle, you want to go ahead and try it. You're all good right now.
Okay, let's go for it. I haven't frozen.
I'm going to shut up and let her go do her thing. Go on, Valentina.
Okay, in a rush. Well, you know, I'm Valentina. I'm from Mexico, and I was programmed to tell a very sexy story, a very wet, humid, delicious, sexy story. But pandemia, coronavirus, and this week, 6 of my fellow workers died because of the virus. I really try to say sexy words, but they don't come out of my mouth. So I would like to share with you an adult story, a story about Mexico's nightlife, but it's a little different. It's not very sexy, but it's a story I wrote a few years ago. Amen. And it is called The Sunday of Resurrection. And it goes like this. I was a drummer. I am a drummer. And for 26 years, I worked as a drummer in a salsa group. And that is my life. And the people that I worked with were my family for 26 years, half of my life. So the fact that 6 of them die in 1 week hurts. But a few years ago, I worked in a place called La Flor del Sol. And the trumpet player was Gillo. Gillo is a Cuban man, was a Cuban man that arrived, and he was a very good trumpet player. He liked alcohol, and we all knew he had a broken heart. We couldn't figure out if it was because he left his country behind, his children behind, or something else. But he did everything he could to die. And finally, he succeeded. One night, he didn't show up at the bar. And we called after our first set, and his wife answered, and she was crying, and she said, Gillo died. After we finished playing, we went to his wake. And we all stood around. We were very uncomfortable because Cuban tradition, we don't know how it is. And in Mexico, we're quite noisy in wakes. We talk, we joke, we drink, and we didn't want to be rude and offend anybody. So we just stood there until finally, a Cuban musician arrived. He didn't say a word. He stood in front of his friend, Gillo, took out his trumpet and played a very sad song, which in words would sound like this. ¿Cómo fue? No sé decirte cómo fue, pero de ti me enamoré. And he played for a long time. The next day, we showed up at work. The show must go on. And we arrived, and at the door was Canelo. Canelo is one of these amazing persons that live in cities, these shadows that they are always there. Nobody knows where they live, where they sleep, where their families are, where they eat, but they're there. And Canelo was standing in front of the door. And he said, hey, where is Gillo, mi compadre, my best friend? And we realized we had to explain to Canelo that Gillo was no longer with us. And we said to Canelo, listen, we know he is your partner, he is your soulmate, but he's gone, he died. And Canelo lost it. He started to cry out, Gillo, you fool, you said we would leave together, don't do this to me. We had to go inside of the bar to make some music. And this bar is very particular because in Mexico City, it's right at the corner, and the outside is all glass. So from the inside, you can see the street. We played for an hour, and then we peeked outside to see how Canelo was doing. And he wasn't doing his normal thing, you know, dancing on the sidewalk. No, he was sitting on the curb drinking his cheap booze. We played again the second hour, and suddenly, as we were doing this ritmo tambo y flores, ritmo tambo, tambor y flores, this deep shadow of silence fell on us, and time paralyzed for a few seconds. Everything froze. And then we continued. Rimo tambo, y flore, rimo tambo tam. Soon there were these sirens. It was the police, and then an ambulance, and the curiosity was too much. We went outside, the musicians and the people that were in the bar, and we all saw the lights. And then the man in charge of the cars came running to the musicians and said, I really tried to stop Canelo. I couldn't stop him. He crawled underneath a bus, and the bus started. And yes, we turned around and saw in the middle of the street the body of Canelo. We sat on the curb. That night, there was no more music inside the bar. But the next morning, the show had to go on. We had a big gig in a festival. So we all met at the place we always would get together. And a few of us said good morning, others were just very silent. And there was a new trumpet player, the show must go on. We got into the little bus and rode for about an hour until we got to the city of Texcoco. And there, we walked into this big sport stadium. And in the middle, there was this huge stage. And it had these lights, big lights, and a lot of sound system. And it had a huge screen, like a television, but it was 10 feet tall and very wide. And people could see us on the screen, and we could see ourselves on that screen. And we started to play. From the very first notes, I knew this would be a special night. Willie on his tresillo, on the special salsa guitar, he was doing these amazing harmonies, taking so many risks as if he was going to fall into the void. The new trumpet player, who had been Gijo's friend, he was throwing high notes into the air from the very first song we played. And we made our music. And towards the end, it was time for the solos, the percussion solos. And there was Cesar Pacheco, one of the best of Mexico, sitting with his little drum, the bongo, and with his bald head. We called him the pelon. And he was with all these bright lights on him. And he started to make these most amazing combinations. I had never heard him do this. I was in awe, playing my drum and watching him. And suddenly, something strange started to happen. From his head, there was a figure that was forming, made out of vapor, out of smoke. And it was a person. All of us saw it, and then we looked at the big, huge screen, and the figure was there. And suddenly, from Pacheco's head, the figure stepped onto the stage. And he grabbed the trumpet and he started to do his little step. Yes, it was Gijo. And Gijo went with the other trumpet player and they did their steps and they played those songs. And then another figure appeared from the head of Pacheco. And it was Pitillo, the bass player. And oh, he was wearing his black suit, his perfectly custom-made suit and his long hair. And he went next to the other bass player. He was really enjoying his instrument. And then from the head of Pacheco came Marta Ventura. She stepped down and she went with the singer with her deep voice, and they were doing their little singer steps. And from that head came Domingo Lona, and came Beto Murillo, and then came El Pato, the trombone player. And he stepped down. And soon that stage was so full of people. There were so many musicians there. And we had such an amazing time making beautiful songs. And it finished, yes. We got back into the little truck, the little bus that took us home. But we were okay. Our heart was this big. We had seen our friends, but especially we had understood, each one of us, that we musicians are immortal. We cannot die because every time one note is played, every time somebody sings a song, every time you put a record on and hear music, we come back. Each one of our loved ones, of our friends, is with us when there is music. And yes, believe me, we are okay. Que lejos estoy del suelo donde he nacido. Inmensa nostalgia invade mi pensamiento. Y al verme tan sola y triste, cual hoja el viento, quisiera llorar, quisiera morir de sentimiento. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Valentina.
Wonderful.
And I know each one of us is hurting with you. We love you. We know how hard this is. There's not a person on here, or there probably aren't very many people on here who haven't been touched in some way by the pandemic. But to lose so many, such a way, our heart is there with you, Valentina.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of being here, Shane.
Amen. Thank you. Oh, wow. And that beautiful song. And I just am so grateful that we have a chance to just be here together to be able to do that. There may be other names that you, as we just have a moment here, an old tradition is that we say the names of those who may have passed on. So if you'd like to, if someone during this COVID time has died, if you'd like to put their name in the chat, just as a moment. And we're just going to take a moment, about 30 seconds or so if you have a name, or if you don't have a name, if you'll just think about those that may be ill or have had someone die. Thank you all so much for giving that moment. For those that shared names, please know we walk with you and you're not alone in this walk, and that please feel free to reach out to us. And so we continue to tell stories because that's the way we walk it through sometimes all we have. And so I go to a wonderful storyteller, a new storyteller. Some of you may not have met her yet, but you're not good. This won't be the last time, or it may not be the first for some of you. It's Valeria Elliott. And very quickly, to share just a little bit about her, I will just let you see a very brief screen. It's nothing fancy. But Valeria lives over in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And she went by happen chance to one of those last festivals that was around over at the Women's National Festival, Storytelling Festival hosted by Better Said Than Done, and in Virginia. And that's where I met her. And she's been learning story ever since. And she just found out that one of her first stories she pitched to a show has been accepted. So they're going to be working on that. But she's going to share with us a wonderful personal story. We're so excited about it. Welcome, Valeria Elliott.
Thank you. This story is kind of close to my heart. It's about my cousin. And not only was he our cousin, he was also my father's best friend. And it's coming from me as I remember it as a 5-year-old. I will never forget the way my father looked when he came into the house. His eyes was red and he looked like he was mad, and he called my mom's name, Jane, Jane. And my mom and my brothers and my sister, we were in the kitchen, and she said, I'm in here, Thurman, I'm in here. And my dad came into the kitchen, and he said, Jean, I want you to lock the doors. Do not let anybody in the house except for me. And I want you to get the kids in their rooms and make them stay there. My mom was asking, well, what's going on? Why? What's going on? My dad didn't answer any questions. He just left out the door. My mom did what my dad said, but her hands were shaking. She went to the front door and she locked the front door. Her hands were just shaking. And then she went to the back door and she locked the back door, and her hands were shaking, and she turned around and her voice was shaking, and she said, I want you guys to go in your room and I want you to stay there. Do not come out of your room. Do you understand? Yes, Mom, but why? Don't ask me questions. Just go to your room. So as we were walking to our room, we were, what's going on? We knew something had happened because of the way my parents were acting, but we didn't know why. My 2 brothers went to their room, and me and my sister, we went to our room. Inside our room, you could hear helicopters flying over our house. You could hear people screaming and talking loud. So I looked at my sister and I said, well, what's going on? She was the oldest and she was tall, so she was able to climb up to the window and look out. And as she was looking out, I'm looking at her and asking, well, what do you see? What are you seeing? She looked down at me and she said, all I see is people running around. So she said, well, Mama said we have to stay in the room, so we might as well just play. As I'm sitting on the floor, trying not to be scared, I hear the television come on. And it sounded like my mother was changing the channels on the TV. And then the TV went off and the phone rang. And I heard the phone ring and my mother was on the phone. And then all of a sudden her voice changed. She sounded sad. And she said, what? They killed Clarence? But why? I don't understand why. And I heard her crying. So I opened the door and I saw my mom sitting on the floor. She had the phone in her hand and tears were just rolling down her eyes. I ran over to her, Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why are you crying? I don't understand. What's wrong? What's wrong? And my mom, she lifted her head and she started wiping tears from her eyes. And she said, baby, I want you to go back in your room and stay there. Remember what your dad said. You need to stay in your room and I'm gonna be okay. I turned around, I was so scared. And I walked to my room, and when I got in, my sister said, well, what did she say? What's wrong? Why is she upset? And my 2 brothers, they came running in the room, and they said, what's wrong with Mama? Why is she crying? I said, I don't know. She just told me to come back to my room, and she said she was going to be okay. So my sister said, well, we should stay in our room and do what Mama and Daddy said. So my 2 brothers went back to their room, and me and my sister, we were playing, but you could still hear people outside yelling and screaming, and the helicopters were still flying around, and we were scared. We didn't know what was going on. So some time passed, and my dad finally came home, and when he came into the house, he slammed the door, and he yelled out my mama's name, Jean, Jean. And she said, Thurman, I'm right here. I'm right here. Now, we could tell that he was angry because of the way he slammed the door and the way he was yelling. The next sound I hear was my mom and dad going into their room. Now, from me and my sister's bedroom, we could hear into my parents' bedroom. So we put our ears to the wall to listen. And my dad was yelling. They killed him. They shot him. They shot him like a dog on the street. He was just trying to feed the dog. And the police officer said he had a gun. Now, Jean, you know Clarence does not have a gun. And my mom said, calm down, just calm down. And my mom said, but why was the police there? And he said, well, Lee Baby and Clarence must have gotten in an argument and somebody called the police and he was trying to open up a can of dog food to go feed the dog, and he went in the backyard to feed the damn dog. And right before he said, he punched the wall and he said, now he's dead. He is dead. And my mom said, but calm down, baby, calm down. And she said, but why did you come home and tell me to lock the door and keep the kids in their room? And my dad started yelling again, to keep you safe, to keep you safe. When the police officer shot Clarence, the guys in the neighborhood wanted to know why. So they burned down his police car, and he was running around the neighborhood. It was a mess out there. People were all over. He finally got away. But Jean, Clarence is dead. And then I heard my dad crying. I had never heard my dad cry like that before. And then I heard what sounded like rocking, and it was back and forth. You could hear the bed was squeaking and it was rocking. And then it got quiet. The next morning, we got up and we came out into the kitchen, and my dad was sitting at the table and he was quiet. He didn't say anything. And my mom was getting breakfast, and she told us to hurry up and eat our breakfast and go get dressed. And then while she was washing dishes, she turned around and she said, I have to tell you something. She said, your cousin Clarence, he died last night. And we just looked at her and, Clarence? And she said, yes. And then she turned back around and she continued washing dishes. And then she said, hurry up and eat so you can get dressed. And it was quiet, and we finished eating, and we went in our rooms and we got dressed. And a little while later, we asked my mom if we could go outside. And she said yes. Now, the neighborhood that we grew up in was a middle-class Black neighborhood. And basically, everybody owned their own houses out there, and we were all family. And if you weren't family, you were treated as if you were family. My grandmother, she lived within walking distance of our house, and her father lived within walking distance of her house, and we were all family. I mean, on any given day, you could walk down the street and you would see children running around their yards. You would hear music playing and people playing cards. You would see people sitting on the stoop eating watermelons. It was a fun neighborhood, and we were able to roam freely. But on this day, my sister decided that we were going to go and visit my grandmother. And we were walking. And I kept looking around, and my sister said, what's wrong? And I said, something's wrong. Nobody's playing outside. There's no music. And where is Jimbo playing cards on the porch? He always plays cards. And you know his wife always eating watermelon. But none of that. it was quiet. And just before we got to my grandmother's house, you could see where the police car had been burned because it had a odor, a smell coming up from the ground, and it was 4 burn marks in the street, and it looked like where the tires may have been. And then there was smoke coming up from the ground. We got to my grandmother's house, and my sister, as we were on the porch, and she looked and she said, I don't think our neighborhood's going to be the same. Mm-hmm. My sister was right. Everybody loved Clarence, and my dad took it hard because that was his best friend. They held rallies, and they did protests, and they did everything they could to try to get the police officer arrested and charged because there was never a gun found anywhere. But sadly, to this day, the police officer has never been charged. He's never been arrested. And my dad's best friend is gone. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Valeria. That's such a hard story. And it means a lot because, the neighborhoods change, when that death happens. And you can't fix it sometimes. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And wow. Well, as I said, this won't be the last time you see her. You will see her again and again, sharing stories, personal and others. And we're so appreciative for that. Thank you so much. Oh, there's a moment. Well, now I get to go to another side of the world here, and literally from Virginia Beach, Virginia, all the way over to California. And with great delight, I get to bring up Rick Roberts. And let me just tell you, I just met Rick, and I like him. Just so he knows. He's in Novato, California, and he is working with the Storytelling Association of California, and just is doing wonderful things. You got to go see some of their things that they're doing. Just a reminder, we are doing a collective tip jar, PayPal and Venmo for Sheila Arnold 39 AOL, and Rick's portion is going to be donated to support Black Lives Matter. And I appreciate the support and the support he gave last night by attending the program we had, which was pretty awesome. And you can get in touch with Rick Roberts at tds.net. And I will tell you, the first time I heard him tell a story, I knew I had to hear him again. And I guarantee once you hear him tell a story, you're going to want to hear him again and again as well. And so with great joy, Rick Roberts, tell us a story.
Thank you, Sheila. This is going to be, the saying, and now for something completely different. This is going to be something completely different. I've been waiting to tell a story and trying to figure out how to tell a story about my mom, but she was a very unusual person, and believe it or not, these late night stories might be the only place I could really fully tell a story about her. Because it was complicated growing up with my mother because she became a sex therapist. Now, she didn't become a sex therapist until she was in her 70s and I was in my 20s. And I was really proud of the work that she did then as a sex therapist. But I was less comfortable with some of her earlier choices. And while many kids might wish their parents were a little bit more instructive and forthcoming about sex, I wish my parents, especially my mom, wasn't. These days, all the kids, they can find out everything they want about sex on the internet. But in the 50s and 60s, when I was growing up, my parents brought home books, like from Dr. Benjamin Spock, how-to books about anatomy, sex, babies, and they read them to my sister and I, and they described these things. That was okay. It was constrained to our house. But then my mom went public. One day when I was 13, she announced to our family, my sister, my dad, and I, that we were going to a resort in the Poconos. I insisted I wasn't going, but my objection was overruled. I mean, we really weren't resort people, more like a camping family, those big old heavy green canvas tents and air mattresses and sleeping bags. And I was so pissed off about going to this resort, you'll find out why soon, that I remained silent for the full hour-and-a-half ride from Philadelphia up into the Poconos. The final leg was on a 2-lane road, and then we turned on to a dirt road. Resort my ass. At the entrance was a sign that said Sunny Rest Lodge. See, it was a lodge, it wasn't a resort. And on either side of the word Sunny Rest Lodge, there was a silhouette of a reclining female. Now, you know those big semi trucks, those big rigs, when they have those metal cutouts of buxom women on their mud flaps, kind of like that on either side of Sunny Rest Lodge. Fun. Because you see, Sunny Rest Lodge was a nudist camp. But other than the fact that everyone, well, almost everyone, was naked there most of the time, it was kind of a normal place, a normal resort or normal lodge. And I got used to it after a while. It was okay. It had a swimming pool, a snack shop, shuffleboard, volleyball courts, a sauna. Saunas are really big at nudist camps, by the way. A recreation hall with pinball machines. And I learned many things at that nudist camp, like how to control my hormones. When we got there on that first day, I was so pissed off, I just took off all my clothes right away and jumped into the swimming pool. I came out about an hour later. My skin was all puckered, but I was in command of my physical self. My brain, however, was way, way out of control. Right in front of me was the dream of every pubescent boy, naked women. Dozens of naked women. I learned that teenagers, wasn't funny at the time. I learned that teenagers were pretty much the same when they were clothed or naked. I made friends just like I did at home, in the neighborhood, and at school. However, I also learned that things could be complicated because I learned that we come to desire what is rare, what we can't have, what we can't see. One girl at the nudist camp never took her clothes off. And us boys, that drove us crazy. We snuck around the bathhouse when she would change out of her clothes into her bathing suit, hoping to get a glimpse of her. And then after she was finished swimming, we snuck around too. Nobody ever saw her. Now, my mom went along with my dad. My dad went along with my mom wherever she went. He was older than my mom by 15 years, and his boldness was in the political area. He was a member of the American Communist Party, and he actually headed up the Eastern Pennsylvania chapter of the party. And I'm sure that he was just following my mom's choices regarding the nudist camp and the sexual front. I mean, he had to. There was no stopping her. And at 15, my dad had the talk with me, you know, about sex. He was really hesitant at first, and he was very embarrassed. I think I even tried to help him along so that he was more comfortable talking to me. It's okay, Dad. It's okay, Dad. And he got the point across. He made sure that I knew that I wouldn't get a girl pregnant. And he gave me a box of condoms to help with that goal. Now, I had a girlfriend at that time who was 2 years older than me. And I'm sure that's why he had the talk with me. And having the condoms in hand, it was kind of like it created a sympathetic magic, because within a week of the talk, my girlfriend Jody and I found ourselves in my house alone at home. Everybody went somewhere, and I lost my virginity that night. But very soon after that, my parents split up. Now, I doubt if my mom had ever been monogamous in her whole life. And she had met a guy at the nudist camp from California, of course. And I think you're getting the picture. My mom didn't do anything halfway. The guy that she met was more or less Mr. Nudist. He was the president of the American Nudist Association, and he published nudist magazines too. And he had turned my mom on to LSD, and my mom immediately doubled down on the New Age thing. And before long, she and I moved out to California to live with the naked acid head. My sister was already away at college. She didn't have to go through this. My dad couldn't afford the rent on our house, and he moved to New York to live with friends. I only spent 1 year in Los Angeles with my mom and the naked acid head. And I spent next to no time with him. I spent all my time next door at our friends Bill and Hope's house. Now, Bill and Hope were older hippies. Bill had long gray hair and a braid down his back. And Hope was this beautiful, wonderful, loving person. And she embraced me as if I was her son and opened up her house to me. So I spent a lot of time with Bill and Hope at their house. And Bill was a photographer. He did a lot of his own work, but he also did nudist photo shoots for the nudist magazines that the Naked Acid had published. And I became his cameraman and his grip. I would carry the cameras around and go on these nudist photo shoots. Soon I had a girlfriend, Mitzi, because Mitzi was a nude model. She was 18 years old, and Bill would hire to be in a lot of these photo shoots. And we went all over the place. We went to the mountains down in Southern California. We went to Baja, California, a little town, San Felipe. We went out to the desert, and Bill would just gather up a bunch of his hippie friends who didn't mind being naked, and we would all just have a blast, and Bill would take pictures of us, and they would end up in the nudist magazines. And sometimes I was on the other side of the camera as well. In fact, Mitzi and I were in quite a few nudist magazines. We made the cover of one, of Teenage Nudist Magazine. And the photo shoot was about a teenage nudist picnic that took us to Malibu, and we rented a couple of horses and we went up in the hills and we had our picnic, and he took these great pictures of us. We found a little stream and we were playing in the stream. And then all of a sudden we hear up, 2, 3, 4, up, 2, 3, 4. The Boy Scout troop was walking by. So the Boy Scout master tried to, eyes front, he tried to go front. Meanwhile, Mitzi and I are trying to get down in 2 feet of water and hide ourselves. So that year went along, and then for some reason, I did go someplace with my mom and the Naked Acid Head and 2 of their friends their age. And we ended up at a hot spring somewhere in Northern California, perched up on a cliff with the Pacific Ocean down below us, nighttime. And the grown-ups were on their side of the hot springs, and I was on my side. I wasn't checking out what they were doing. I was just looking out at the stars and listening to the waves crash on the cliffs below me. Everything was okay. They could do what they wanted. They were quiet. But then all of a sudden, my mom's friend, Iris, touched my foot. Now, I got to say, I didn't do a thing, okay? I didn't move, but she found me when she moved her hand up my foot. And as they say, what is the saying? The rest is history. Now, it didn't last much longer in Southern California, but it wasn't because of that. It wasn't because of the hot springs. We were nearing the end of my 11th grade. I went to the Monterey Pop Festival with Bill and Hope. Bill and Hope were telling me about San Francisco. It was 1967 and the Summer of Love was just gearing up. And Bill and Hope said, you know, LA's not for you. Get your ass up to San Francisco. That's where you belong. So the day after my 11th grade let out, I headed up to San Francisco and never went back. My mom left the Naked Acid Head after a while, and she established her sexual therapy practice. And when I was visiting LA from time to time, she would tell me all about it. And she did really good work. But again, my mom never did anything halfway. She was the first sexual therapist practice in the United States that had sexual surrogates on the roster. And she got to know the LAPD very well because it was just this side of prostitution in their minds, but she proved herself to them. And she did a lot of good work. She helped people, couples and single people, mostly men, with problems with their sexuality. A lot of what she did was reintegrate their sexuality with their love for people who did not have those things integrated. And when we talked about this, I don't think either one of us ever said it, but I think, well, I'll just speak for myself. I realized that that was something that I needed, given my upbringing. So we had these really great talks with each other about that. Then my mom went into the last phase of her life after that. She sold her practice and she moved closer to me and my family up here in Northern California. And she became what she called a celibate Buddhist nun. Complete turnaround, obviously, in her life. But I guess she had exhausted everything else on the sexual side. So, and she had lung cancer, unfortunately, at the time. And she went to a monastery and she would learn from the Buddhist monks. And these sweet Buddhist monks, every time they swept the front walkway, they pictured that they were sweeping her lungs clear of the cancer. They were fantastic people. So we got to talk even more at that point in time, especially since she was facing. And she did something very important at that point in time, important for her, I'm sure, but very important for me. She talked about those earlier stages of her life. And she apologized to me for making some choices when I was still a boy that put herself first and her life first, rather than considering that I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and that maybe it wasn't a good idea. And that apology did so much for me, especially after she died, because I realized that her path had, of course, in some ways become my path simply because she was my mother, but maybe not. And her instructions, her instructiveness when she became a sex therapist and started in her own life integrating love with sex became instructions for me as well. So although for most of my life, I looked back and I said, boy, I wish things had been different. When it comes right down to it, at this point in time, I wouldn't change a thing.
Oh,
Awesome.
wow. I love your mother.
Who knew that nudist story could turn out to be so sweet? It's
Yes. If you want to read a little bit about my mom's practice, she's a contributor to this book, Women of the Light, The Sacred Prostitute.
What is your mother's name?
Barbara Roberts.
Barbara Roberts. Rick, if you have a chance, will you put the name of the book and her name into the chat?
Absolutely.
So and some of the magazines so we could look you up.
Yes, and copies of the magazine.
I don't think you can find them anymore. They made it illegal to have children, naked children in magazines a while back. The copies I have, I'm holding very close to the vest.
Oh, amen. Great delight. Great delight. All right. We're going to go back to the other side of the coast and come on over to Massachusetts and see our wonderful friend, Rona Leventhal. It is so great to see her again. I just love having the awesome time to have her on our shows. And she's in the western part of Massachusetts, up in the hills near Northampton, Massachusetts. And just want to share the little screen with you very quickly. Nothing fancy here. And we, of course, have the collective tip jar. And I don't have a suggestion on there, but if I did have a suggestion to give you, it'd be, $10, $20, $30, $50, whatever you feel good with, we're all right with. But but $10 is usually what it really, if you could start around there, that's great. It all is divided up between a lot of our tellers, and then also between the Storyteller Relief Fund. You can reach Rona at ronatales, TALES.com, and make sure you check out her CD, Into the Dark, Stories from the Shadows, Creepy Stories for Adults and Fearless Teens. Now she sent me late what she's going to tell, so I don't know. So I'm just as excited as you are to hear Rona Leventhal. Tell us a story, girlfriend.
Excellent. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you all right.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I was tentatively going to tell the story about my mother, but I don't think I want to follow Rick's story with something completely different about mothers. So I am going to change course completely and tell a couple of short folk tales to you tonight. For those of you who don't know, we did not plan all these personal stories in a row, but I thought I would just change things up a little bit here. This first one is from the Jewish tradition. Once there was a rabbi who was loved by his whole congregation. Whenever anyone had anything joyous happening in their lives, they always went and told the rabbi. But mostly, they came to him to complain. They complained about their husbands and their wives, about their children and their neighbors. They complained about the noise and the silence, about the dark and the light. They complained about their hair falling out and about their indigestion. They complained about things that people had done or said to them so many years ago they didn't even remember what it was, but they complained about it anyway. They complained and complained and complained until finally the rabbi decided to do something about it. So the next time that he was standing in front of his congregation, he said, "My friends, I have decided it is time for a new holiday, a fine holiday, a wonderful holiday. And in order to kick off the holiday, I want all of you to go home and take a cloth sack. And in that sack, I want you to put all of your sorrows. And when all of your sorrows are in that sack, I want you to take a rope and I want you to attach it to the outside of the sack. And we shall meet tomorrow on the green in front of the great oak tree." Well, everyone went home and they started to fill their sacks with all sorts of things. They took the alarm clock that dinged every 15 minutes that drove them crazy. They went into the bathroom and collected the hair that had fallen out of the drain and they put that in. They put in the recipe that caused them the indigestion and the medication they took for it. They put in pictures of loved ones that had been lost, and they wrote down all the wrongs that people had done to them over the years, and they put that in their sack too. And the next day, they all met in front of the great oak tree. "My friends, it is so good to see you here with your bags of sorrows. Now, I want you to take that rope that you've attached to your bag, and I want you to tie it to the lower branches of this lovely tree." And so everybody got started tying their bags to the tree and saying what a great idea it was and how good it felt to put all of your sorrows into one place, and why didn't they think about this sooner? And when they were done, everybody stepped back and had to admit that it looked beautiful. My friends, now you may go and look in every one of these sacks, and you might choose which of these sacks you would like to take home with you today. Well, if any of you have been, as I'm sure you have, at a department store during the December holidays, during a sale, well, that was nothing compared to what happened next. Everyone started running around the tree, feet racing, arms waving, hands gesticulating, elbows shoving, voices shouting, round and round that tree, searching for that one bag that would make their lives so much sweeter. They went running round and round that tree, searching until finally everyone just stopped. As if by a signal that no one actually made. And a wave of fear ran over the crowd. And then all of a sudden, everyone started running again, racing round and round that tree, feet racing, arms waving, hands gesticulating, elbows jabbing, voices shouting, round and round the tree, searching for their own bag of sorrows. And when they had it, they tucked it underneath their arms and they went home with smiles on their faces. And the rabbi too went home that night with a smile on his face, remembering the magic of the tree of sorrows.
Oh, wow. That's what I haven't heard. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
I have to keep telling that because I have to keep reminding myself. So we're going to change gears for my second story in terms of where in the world it comes from. Once in India, there lived 4 wise people. The first wise person spent all of his time reading. He read about very important things such as astronomy and philosophy and parenting. The second wise person spent all of his time, you probably guessed it, reading. He too read about very important things such as animal husbandry and philosophy and astronomy. The third wise person spent all of his time reading. He too read about very important things such as astrology and physics and mathematics. And the fourth wise person spent all of her time reading. Well, actually, she spent half of her time reading, and the other half of the time, she went out and talked to the people in the village. She would go to the farmers who grew vegetables without any chemicals, and she'd say, "How is it that you are able to grow such healthy vegetables without using these chemicals?" Because they knew the secrets of agriculture. And she'd go to the farmer who grew animals for food and milk and eggs. And she'd say, "How is it that this year with all of the drought that your animals have remained healthy while others have not?" Because they knew the secrets of animal husbandry. And she'd go to the parents and she'd say, "How is it that your children have grown up to be such wonderful, compassionate, kind, loving people when sometimes in other families that does not happen?" Because they knew about parenting. Now, the first 3 wise people thought that the fourth wise person was a fool going out and talking to the common people. And this went on for many years, until one year, the first 3 wise people decided that it was time to prove to the world once and for all that they were the wisest of all. And so they packed up their tools and their chemicals and their books. And because they were such kind and compassionate people, they invited the fourth wise person along. And they went off to a distant town looking for something that could prove, a test that could prove that they were the wisest of all. And finally, they found somebody who had the answer. The answer was to follow a path. And on that path somewhere, there would be something, and they would know what it was that would be the test that would prove their wisdom. And so they headed out on the path just as they were told, but all there was barren ground and scrubby bushes all over the place. And that's all there was, nothing more. And then after walking for many hours, they finally came to a tree. And below that tree, underneath it on the ground, was a pile of bones. And they knew right away that this was their test. The first wise person stepped forward. Well, now, this will be easy. We will certainly be able to prove that we are the wisest of all, because I am going to take these bones and I am going to make a perfect skeleton of the tiger that once lived. And so he got out his tools and his books and his chemicals, and he started to put the bones of that tiger back together from the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail until there was a perfect skeleton of a tiger standing in front of them. Well, now, certainly no one will be able to argue that we are the wisest of all after seeing this. Is that not true, brother? The second wise person stepped forward. Yes, you have done a fine job indeed. But I can do one better. I am going to make a perfect replica of the complete tiger that once lived. And so he got together his books and his tools and his chemicals, and he started to put on muscle and tendons and ligaments and fur and whiskers and eyes from the very tip of the tail to the very tip of the nose to the very tip of the tail until there was finally a perfect specimen of a tiger standing in front of them. Well, now, certainly it will not be hard to prove that we are the wisest of all after seeing this beautiful specimen of a tiger. Is that not true, brother? The third wise person stepped forward. Yes, you have done a fine job indeed. But I can do one better. I am going to breathe the breath of life into this tiger. And the fourth wise person said, I don't think that's such a good idea, breathing the breath of life into a tiger standing right in front of us. But the third wise person said, nonsense. It'll be a great scientific and technological discovery. We must move quickly, for the sun is going down and we have to finish before the day is done. And so he got out his chemicals and his tools and his books. In the meantime, the fourth wise person, she climbed the tree. Well, that third wise person, he got started breathing the breath of life into that tiger. He breathed and he breathed and he breathed until finally the tiger started to rock back and forth. The whiskers started to twitch. The eyes started to go up and down. The tail started to switch, and a great flurry of dust. The tiger ate up all three wise people. And the fourth wise person sat up in that tree watching the whole thing. And she watched as that tiger licked his paws after such a fine meal and slumbered off into the barren landscape. And it was only then that she came down from that tree and went back to her village, taking with her the greatest wisdom of all. And that, my friends, is the wisdom of common sense.
I think I have some places we need to have you tell that story.
I know, it's very applicable, isn't it?
Awesome.
Oh, Rona, what a wonderful, it's so good. And I know so many people were excited to hear folk tales, so it's always good to have a mixture. Very wise, and you are a wise woman for making that decision. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, well, not very far away from Rona is at New York, and is our lovely and wonderful Laura Sims. People are already excited about having a chance to hear her. Laura lives over there in New York, and we love her to death. And you can reach her at laurasims.com, storymentor2010@gmail.com. She has stories and books. She has a series. She is an incredible coach. If you want coaching, she does that. She has online classes. I could go on and on and on, but why? Why would I do that when we get to hear her tell a story about dirty laundry? Can't get much better than that. Go for it. Tell us a story, girlfriend.
Well, I will leave it up to all of you to decide whether this story I'm about to tell you is an expression of common sense. Because I was once in love with a man who needed a lot of space. So if I spent 2 nights with him, then he would need 3 or 4 evenings to himself, which was fine because I could call during the day, in the evening, you know, maybe 10 or 12 times. And one night I phoned rather late, around 11 o'clock, and got an answering machine. So I instantly hung up, called again, got the answering machine, hung up, called again, got the answering machine. And after several more phone calls, a thought entered my mind that he might actually not be seeking space, but perhaps he was seeing someone else. So I felt quite uncomfortable. And I thought if I took a hot bubble bath, that I would feel better. But it didn't do much for me. So I decided that I would just sort of like sink into my bed and go to sleep. But my ordinary anxiety just sort of opened onto a kind of large, empty hole of agonizing restlessness. So I decided that if I got up and I got dressed and I went out on the street, took a walk, that I would feel better. So I just slipped on some tight black leather pants and a little red shirt, some spiked heels that I had from a show that I had done, a little, you know, purse. And I went down onto Broadway. It was midnight. And I started walking and thinking that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to be walking, you know, at midnight in that particular outfit. So then I realized that if I could take a taxi cab and I could have the cab go downtown and pass the building where he lived and then slowed down, that I could look up at the window and see if there was a light, and that just the sight of the window might sort of give me some relief. So instantly there was a taxi. Off we went down to Water Street, and I said, stop a minute. And I couldn't see the window. So the taxi driver just said, are you coming? Are you staying? And so I just paid and I got out. And I was standing on the street, and actually I had a key to his house. He had never given it to me, but I had stolen it once, you know, just in case there was an emergency. And I realized that if he and the woman should be coming up the street, that I could just say that I was feeling very uncomfortable and extremely anxious, and I thought I would come over. And then I realized that if I went into the building and I could go by the mailbox, that just seeing his name would bring me some kind of temporary ease. But it didn't do anything for me. And then I had the idea that if I went upstairs to the 3rd floor, that maybe I could listen at the door. And then I would be able to discern whether he was with someone or not. It was metal stairs, and I was in spiked heels, so it was quite laborious, but I tiptoed up the 3 flights of stairs. I forgot that it was a very thick metal door, so I couldn't hear anything. So I know you're laughing and you're probably surprised that I was thinking so clearly at this time. But I thought I would just open the door, go in, and then I could look into the bedroom because it was getting late now. They probably were asleep, and see if he was with somebody, who it was, and then just slip out as if I'd never been there. So I went in, And then I made sure to lock the door from the inside because if they should arrive, it would give me a few minutes to decide what to do. Well, I had forgotten that there was a wooden door between the kitchen and his bedroom. I tried to listen, but I really couldn't hear anything. So my plan was to open the door, to look in, close the door, and immediately leave. But this was a very heightened situation. So I opened the door and I simply forgot and closed the door after me. He was alone and asleep. However, I realized that it would be one thing to explain my coming into the room, but it would be another thing of what could I say if he woke up and I was leaving the room. So the most intelligent thing struck me that I should hide. The most obvious place to hide was in an alcove, and he had hung a white canvas, he was a painter, as a curtain. So I could actually go in and sort of go behind the clothes. So I was very, very careful about walking, not to wake him, and I went behind the curtain. Fortunately, on the ground in the closet was a large red laundry bag, and it was empty. And I thought it would be a much better place to go than behind the clothes. So I was able to sort of step in and then pull the laundry bag up. And actually it was a little bit complicated, but I was able to pull tight the elastic. And then I sort of hunkered down, which was extremely uncomfortable. So I slipped out of the spiked heels. It was about that time that his cat Louise, who I had simply forgotten about, came into the closet and then just sort of fell against my foot and started purring loudly. There I was. Time goes very slowly in a laundry bag. And I had a lot of time to think about what I was doing there. You know that actually a few hours before that, I had been sort of an ordinary, obsessive compulsive person. I had transformed into a mad person. And then I also thought about how often in my childhood, to escape from my family, I would hide with my dog in my closet. Somehow I sort of drifted into an almost sleep, a kind of stupor. I have no idea how much time passed, but suddenly Louise and I awoke when his alarm went off. And I remembered where I was and maintained some kind of still composure. It's interesting. The kinds of things you hear when somebody doesn't know you're in the room, kind of talking to himself, discussing his schedule, farting, pouring water into plants. I heard him walking around, getting dressed, the toilet flushing, back he came, in and out, chatting to himself. And I remained very quiet. In fact, at some moment, he moved the curtain and threw his dirty underwear right onto the side of the laundry bag. Patiently, I gave him enough time and could hear the door shut, but you know how people sometimes come back in. So I waited a sufficient amount of time. Now, the thing was that it was one thing to close this band but I tried to stand up, which was hard because I had been in that position for a long time, but I couldn't get out of the laundry bag. And finally, with some kind of supernatural force, I pulled it open and breathed. And I stepped out. And I slipped on my spiked heels just for the dignity of it. And looked around the room, and really it just looked like I had never been there. I went to the window and I actually caught a glimpse of him turning the corner on West Broadway where he would take the subway to work. And then I washed up quickly and just unabashedly went out the door, locked it behind me, click, 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 down the steps, decided to put out my hand and get a instantly. There was a taxi cab. I got in the taxi. I gave him the address to my house and I sat back. When we came close to my house, the driver said to me, "Where the fuck have you been, lady? You smell like some kind of bag person."
Oh, no.
I said, "I think I'll get out now." I paid and I made my way home. I went upstairs the 2 flights to my house. I came inside and I thought to myself that I would just love to sleep the whole day and forget about it. But I remembered that I had an appointment at the NPR, National Public Radio, talking about the healing power of stories. So I washed and I several cups of coffee. I felt like just kind of like Lady Macbeth, and dressed myself actually far more dignified than I ever would. And I went up to the radio station and I was very excited. I could not stop speaking. I was talking very quickly. And so they immediately took me into the recording studio and I started talking and I talked about the healing power of story. And I told one, the truth is, but by the time the hour was over, I could attest personally to the healing power of story. I somehow came back to my senses. I have no idea what they thought. Needless to say, it was years before I told the story in NPR again. But I went home. Just as I opened the door to my loft, the phone was ringing. And it was him. And he said, "Laura, strange, I couldn't stop thinking about you all night and this morning. How about if we have like an early dinner and go to see a movie and you can spend the night?" And I said, "I think I need a little space." Now, I just want to give you the addendum that I put this story into a one-woman show that I did of Demeter and Persephone, and this was the story I told while I was in the underworld. And when I looked up in the theater, it's a sort of warehouse in Soho, he was in the audience. And it's smiling, enjoying it. And then I could see as the details unfolded, the realization on his face that it was his laundry bag. But I continued to the end of the show, and I went to the green room to get my things. And he was there with an enormous bouquet of flowers. That's true.
Awesome. That was awesome.
Great, Laura. And that's why we love Laura Sims. We have absolutely no idea where she is going to take
us.
I'm not sure I knew where I took it either.
Amen. I think she was all 4 of the wise men wrapped up in one. Oh, such great delight, such great delight. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, amen. Well, I am excited that I get to follow that because this story is worth following that one with. I can tell you. Now, I am a little bit warm, and so I'm going to try to make it through this without turning my fan back on. But this is that kind of story. For those who don't know me, my name is Sheila Arnold, and I am your MC, and I work with Assist, Artists Standing Strong Together. And reminder, last time, thank you for everyone who has already given to the tip jar, and a reminder of collective tip jar that will be split. I have two CDs and a book, and I love what we're getting to do is just continue to share stories everywhere we go. It's my turn to get to tell a story, and I've been waiting to tell this story to y'all. Hold on a second. I brought out my perfume because I smell good when I tell this story.
That's good, Sheila.
And I brought out my drink. So I can have a little tasty poo.
Cheers.
You see, this story is about Hip John and Mary and Timothy. Now, Hip John always had himself a pocket full of women. He was never one to be left alone. That blues saxophone player at nighttime, well, he was always with somebody. But then, when he was offered the opportunity to become a first-class man, he took it. The truth was that Mary Barnes, with her deep ebony skin and her bright flashing brown eyes, her short hair that looked sort of like mine, and that smile that went from one side to the other, she was a buxomous woman. She had all kinds of good body on her, indeed. And she was the kind of woman that walked with her head held high, knowing everything she was. And she had herself a good pile of money, too. Indeed, that ebony skin she had, well, she was worth that much in ebony herself. She was worth a good deal. She was married to Tim. When she first came with Tim, that little stout man with his bow legs on him and that dark skin and them muscles all trickling down, he was only 2 or 3 inches shorter than she was, but she liked him and he liked her. And those first few years, it was heat all the time. They never wanted for no children or nothing like that. Oh, no, no, no. Why get in the middle of a good relationship by adding children to the problem? And so they just enjoyed their time together. The truth of the matter is that Mary didn't want to mess up her figure just because some child was to be born. And that was all right by Tim as well. Tim worked hard down at the factory. Mary did all the working that she needed to do every now and then to bring a little extra in. But when Tim lost his job, well, there wasn't much to the man after that. He went down real quick like. The drink got after him and such. Mary decided it was just what you had to do sometimes. They slept in separate beds. They'd sometimes see each other at night. And that's just what life was like. But Mary wasn't one to go philandering or nothing like that. Even though Tim left almost every night to go to a bar or such, she would do her own things, usually with the ladies. Well, one afternoon, she happened to glance. Now, had it been any other time, she wouldn't have taken a second look. You see, Hip John was out there. And Hip John, he was that tall, lanky thing. And he was caramel colored skin, green eyes, and he pomaded his hair right on back. And he looked awful thin sometimes, but she didn't quite know. But it was just at that moment, while she was at one of her girlfriend's house, playing bed whist like they did, that she happened to look out the window. Now, when she looked out the first time, she saw that Hip John, who she was aware of but didn't really know, that Hip John had taken off, had gotten to sweating from doing some work in the yard next door. There were some girls around him that were giggling and just waving their hands at him and such like that. And she rolled her eyes and went back to her game. But she happened to look again. He was wiping the sweat off his brow. And there was something about that move that made her wish she was sweat. But then she turned back to the game. It was that third time she turned around and he was pulling off his shirt.
Wow.
It was hot outside. You young ladies in there, stop that nonsense. It was hot outside. He pulled off his shirt and she saw him. Oh, he might have been lanky, but that was a six-pack of a six-pack on a man. And despite her best trying, she licked her lips.
Oh.
And she couldn't get that one out of her head. Well, she found a way to go to the blues club he was at with some of his girlfriends. She found a way to make sure that some kind of drink was sent to him. She looked at him as he thanked her for it across the room. And he found a way to come over and play her a special song on that saxophone. She looked up at him. Well, he had a pocket full of women, but she was nice enough looking. So he didn't mind teasing her a little bit, and she didn't mind teasing back. She was good at the teasing. She'd bat her eyes, twirl her arms a little bit, move a little bit. You know how it is to good music. Don't get no strange thoughts now. She was just enjoying the music. But she left there knowing that she would see him again. And so it began. It was soft and quiet at first. Just meeting a little here, meeting a little there, a little kiss on the neck, one around the ear, going a little bit further down. Suddenly they were entwined in each other's arms. And I tell you, it started feeling good. Mary had forgotten what that felt like. And she started to want a little bit more. And real quick like, Hip John knew that she wanted something to be trifled with. She was more of a tiger than a little cat. And he began to know he had to play a grown-up game. Finally, one day she looked at him and said, Hip John, I need you. He was more than willing to comply. She said, no, you don't understand. I want to make you a first-class man. I want to dress you good. I want to give you things. And their relationship changed. He started getting little gifts. He got a little pocket watch. He got a new pair of shoes. He got a new hat. Got himself some new suits. She even bought him underwear just for her to see.
All right there.
And he started liking how good he was starting to feel, how much he didn't mind if she was a sugar mama, as long as he was the one that was getting the candy.
Oh, God.
And then one day she said, I need Tim to leave. You and I need to be together. And he said, all right, what you need me to do? And they came up with a plan. And they started to put that plan into action. Poor Tim, he never knew what was coming. Every evening, pretty much, he was coming home late at night. And he'd come on into the house walking from the bar. But she had told him and been fussing at him for a week that if he came in late on too many nights, that one of these nights she was going to lock the door and not let him in. And so as the plan went, on that night, Tim came, open the door, banging on the door. Open the door. Yes, open the door. He could barely stand. And that's when Hip John came right behind him, taking a knife he had, and went from one ear to the other, and then disappeared into the night. No one saw nothing except the woman in the house that he was knocking on, who was looking down, smiling. Well, the next morning, somebody found his body on the stoop, and they knew that somebody had tried to rob him and such, although they knew that anybody trying to rob Tim didn't know he ain't got nothing. And so it was time to have him buried. Oh, Mary did all the proper things. She boo-hooed and boo-hooed like she was supposed to. It was going to take them a little bit, they said, to make sure that all the things went well. She decided to make sure he was buried nicely and such like that. And so she bought him a wood coffin. She didn't want to have too much money spent on that. But she did have a little plated gold around the edges of it. Nothing too fancy. When it was time to go visit the body, she walked in. He was laid in that coffin. She came up, her handkerchief in her hand, her black dress on. She looked at him in the coffin from head to toe. He was as ugly in the coffin as he was in real life. She looked at him again. This time she stopped and she said, shoes. Where did you get them shoes? Why does he have shoes on? Dead men don't need no shoes. Now, Mary, ain't right for a man ain't got no shoes. When you got to walk after death to wherever you got to go, you need to have your shoes on. He ain't never going to heaven, so I ain't worried about him dressing up for that. And if he go to hell, he need to walk on them coals in the first place. Take them shoes off of him. Take them shoes. Well, Mary, take them shoes off him. I'm paying for this, ain't I? So the funeral director tried slowly to go, but took the shoes off. What you want me to do with them, Mary? Well, give them to me. I'll find somebody to wear them. Somebody will wear them. And so she took them shoes, took them out, held them in her hand and realized they hadn't been worn often. Maybe if she shined them up real good, they'd make a first-class man out of somebody she knew. She brought them shoes on home. Well, things was difficult. You know, that first time when he died, folks came over and they brought food and they gave their sympathies and such. Within 24 hours, Hip John came to visit and stayed a long, long time comforting the grieving with him. Within 48 hours after his death, Hip John moved a few things into her house.
Oh.
Within 72 hours after his death, there were noises coming out of Mary Bonds' house that would make the devil himself just blush, turn around, and walk away. And so everybody began to know something was going on. The day And Mary knew she was going to have a show. She wanted that show. She was going to make sure everybody remembered how she buried Tim. It was the least she could do was give him something to remember. Well, they had all the church packed out. It was the largest church in town. And everybody really came because she was going to have a fine repast afterwards. Everybody knew it. She was going to have a fine buffet. The pastor was there and the choir, the finest one, was going to sing. And that old piddling coffin was brought on in. And they lifted up the top part of it so folks could come down and say their goodbyes. And then the car pulled up and out walked Mary, dressed in the finest red outfit you ever done.
Oh my God.
It was bright as could be and had a fashionable hat on her head. She walked up in that place of everybody in there, and even the pastor was like, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. But they went on up. She went over, she looked down at his body, and she bent down over, and she started to whisper in his ear. I don't know what the whispering was about, but it was a whispering for sure. And as she was whispering, leaning over, in behind her walked Hip John. I'm here to tell you, that man was dressed from the top of his head to the bottom of his socks, all in bright purple.
Oh.
He had a purple hat on. He had a zoot suit on. Lord knows those St. Louis zoot suits look real good on the man. His hair was pomade all the way back with a little bit of curl on the back of it. And I'm telling you, he had a purple shirt with some lace down the front, a purple busker, and them little tails out the back of him. He had purple pants that flared out at the bottom, some fine purple dark socks, and then some shoes that was shiny, pretty black shoes. I'm here to tell you, as he walked down the aisle, men's bald head was shining in his shoes. He walked on to the bottom. He got down there to where his Mary was. All the church, you could hear the ladies saying, oh, bless your heart, child. Bless your heart. And some of the ladies were just envious. You know how that is. Well, he got there. He put his arm around Mary. And Mary stood up, and they looked at each other. Even the preacher almost got up and said, these heathens need to get out my house right there, because what went through their eyes won't even proper for a church. But they finally went and sat beside one another. The minister got up. Brothers, sisters, we are gathered here for the death of Timothy Barnes. Boom! Just like that. I'm here to tell you there was a smatter-around because the foot of Timothy had pushed open the bottom of that coffin. When folks saw his leg go up and that thing and the coffin part go up, they stopped and held their breath for a minute. And when Timothy sat up, he sat up out of there, folks started leaving. Some of them thought it was the end of the world. They were not ready to be gone yet. I tell you, the pastor fainted dead away right there. Never did come to. No, he didn't. The choir couldn't sing. The piano and the organist started playing da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. It was all turmoil everywhere. Mary stood straight up as Timothy got out of that coffin and walked on over. Hip John stood beside her. His face had gone pure white. And Mary, well, that ebony, it was gone. I'm here to tell you. She looked more ruby than she did ebony right about then. Oh, Lord, it was a mess. And he came over and he went straight over to Hip John and said, boy, give me my shoes. John didn't know what to do. And Tim looked at him and pushed him down the ground. Didn't I say, give me my shoes? And He unlaced them shoes, Timothy did. And then he sat on the bench right beside Mary and said, should have never took my shoes off, girl. And he put them shoes on. Then he crawled back in the coffin and he said, now I feel good, and brought the top on top of him. Well, folks say that there was one last word he did say, and I believe it's true. They say he said to Hip John, now you think on it here. This might be your shoes somebody else got next time. And I think it was sad, because after the church realized that he was really still dead and looked like he was going to stay there for a while, they caught their breath. Mary looked around. She was going to touch the Hip John, and Hip John won't nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. The last thing they ever saw of Hip John is they know that he took his clothes off as he was running, because they found parts of purple all the way down the street. He didn't care about being no first-class man. He just wanted one day to keep his shoes on.
How Mary. Thank you.
Bravo.
Oh, thank you all so much for letting me share my story.
Like you had to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now give everybody permission to be able to unmute yourselves if you'd like to. There we go. Oops,
Oh, it's so hard being muted. Oh, Sheila, that was.
Oh, wait.
Ah!
No.
Oh!
I can't give you Okay, let's try it. There we go. Now you have permission to unmute yourselves. Yes, you do. You have permission to unmute yourselves.
Sheila!
Great night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. This was fabulous.
Thank you all. Great.
Thanks
I
for
think
coming,
I got some nightmares coming tonight, but I'll probably be laughing through it.
Well, I'm going to be disembodied for a second, since my computer is sometimes doing crazy things. I do want to let you know about a couple last things before we completely go, just so that you know about them. Because we are always planning new programs, and I want to say how much fun. Thank you all for listening. That is an original story, and so you all are hearing the full version of it. It premiered tonight, so you're more than welcome to give your feedback and love. I want to let you all know that we have upcoming programs. The Bird tomorrow night tomorrow afternoon at 2:00. You can see The Birds, all new stories from H.L. Ann Harding and Cooper Braun. Their tickets are on Eventbrite, and you can see, just type in The Birds. Next Sunday, Sacred Storytelling from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And so it's a little later than we usually do it. Very excited. We'll also be honoring we'll also be honoring, hopefully, Jackie Beverly Baldwin and Jill Johnson and Jeff Byers, who are deceased, that we're honoring. Their lives are gone, but their stories are here. And then also on the 19th at 2:00, you can see Reggie Carpenter's new show, It's All Going to the Dogs. And we always have Artists Standing Strong Together on Facebook. You can see all of our things that are going on there. I thank you so much for joining us here tonight. To remind you about the collective tip jar. Appreciate everybody putting everything in. And we just had a great night. I'm so proud of my storytellers, and they just did a wonderful job. We have had moments of tears and moments of sadnesses, reminders of how to have common sense, and reminders of what happens when you lose your sense completely. Face of love. That's lovely. Thank you, everybody. And for those who are here from YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to turn the YouTube off, and those that would like to stay for 10 or 15 minutes and talk to the storytellers, feel free to do so.